This young man about to speak is royalty. I'll tell you why he's royalty. Blake was the first speaker at the very first Magnolia.js. Right before, was it 2019? Was the first one 2019? Right before, yeah. 2019, we're here. We were at the convention center at the time, but we met at the speaker's dinner. He was the first speaker at the first Magnolia.js. At some point, y'all gonna get that dude a belt? Y'all gonna get him a belt or something? Richard, give him like a wrestling belt or crown? All right, cool. You gets nothing and like it. Nope, you gets nothing. Nothing else to say about this guy other than he is, right, the number one. Also, Dungeons and Dragons people, D&D, plays D&D both for true and virtual. And he said he didn't like the way the dice were being rolled or something, so he created his own dice rolly thing. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. Thank you, nerd. All righty. Oh, make a whole lot of noise for the first, the beginning, and all of that. Make noise for Blake Watson!
All right, cool. Do we have sound? Can everyone hear me good? Yes, all right, hey everyone, I'm Blake. I'm super excited to be here sharing in what Kenneth calls tech nerd stuff. I want to share a few things up front real quickly. You can follow along with the text version if you want. This will have like links to stuff and some CodePen demos and stuff like that. A little bit about me. I work as a front-end engineer with MRI Technologies. They're in Houston, Texas, and we build web-based spacesuit hardware management systems for teams at NASA. Aside from work, I'm a side project enthusiast, which is kind of what my last talk at Magnolia was about. I have a disability called spinal muscular atrophy. So I use a power wheelchair, which for some reason was dead today. I had to get a battery charger and charge it back there a minute ago. And I use a lot of assistive tech. Like Kenneth said, I like playing D&D, blogging, writing, and I have a bit of a font hoarding problem. I'm proud to support MagnoliaConf as a sponsor, and I know it's a lot of hard work to put the conference on, so I really appreciate the work of Kayla and Richard, everyone involved. I'm using my sponsorship to promote this totally free online book I wrote last year called HTML for People. HTML isn't only for us tech nerds, I think it should be for everyone. So you can pass this along to your non-coder friends, anyone you think might be interested in learning how to make a website with HTML. It's super beginner friendly. It's htmlforpeople.com. Okay, y'all, I have a confession to make. I'm fed up, I'm absolutely sick of front-end build tools. I'm talking about Webpack, Vite, Rollup, ESBuild, anything that processes your front-end code into a bundled version that can be read by the browser. It seems like every project you look at shoves an NPM installation in your face. And I'm not saying there aren't things to like about them, but they add complexity to your app and some damn annoying technical debt in the long term. And the thing is, browsers have been getting better. They have native support for stuff that like we used to have to use build tools. So I say now is the time to jump ship and leverage the power of the browser directly. So to that end, we're gonna go on a whirlwind tour of the features and techniques that are available in today's browsers. But first, just to be fair, let's consider what build tools are doing for us. So a huge reason for turning to build tools is to support languages and framework file formats that the browser doesn't know anything about. So like the biggest examples are TypeScript, Sass, JSX for like templates in React, framework-specific formats like Svelte and Vue, Tailwind for Atomic CSS, and many more. They also make it easy to install third-party code. So you npm install them and import them, and then you're good to go. The build step takes care of dependency management and module resolution and bundling and minification and all that sorts of stuff. It usually bundles all your code into one file for the browser to read, and it can minifies your code to reduce the file size. Build tools can eliminate parts of your code base that aren't being used, and it can do fancy things like chunking that tries to serve your bundle like in a just-in-time manner. And they can do other things like process images. If you have a lot of images, they can optimize them for the web automatically. It sounds like I'm doing a marketing pitch for build tools, but I'm just trying to give them a fair shake, okay? I don't want anybody accusing me of not being fair. But they're pretty annoying. They add a lot of complexity. Let me tell you a story. It goes a little something like this. You start a new project. You npm install a thing. Then you realize you'd like to use another thing, so you npm install that. And then that thing that you install has you install a few other things. And now you're really cooking with grease, and you start building out your project, and everything is going great. You ship the project and pat yourself on the back. A year later, you get a request to make a small, easy change to the project. You open it up, you run the build, and the build fails. You poke around, and then you realize some package or other needs to be updated. But that package can't be updated because it relies on another package that needs to be updated. And that package can't be updated without making a bunch of changes to your code. And before you know it, you're looking at hours of meta work just to get your build process up again so that you can make a change that should have taken 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, are the thousands of packages we're shoving into these apps like safe? Nope. We're having to put way too much trust in all these package authors and all these packages and infrastructure. And every time we install one, our attack surface becomes a little bit larger. Build tools and bundlers have been around for a while, and they offered a developer experience that we didn't get with browsers at the time directly. But with some of the features that are available now, we can still have nice things without the build step. So no more compiling. Let's write the code that the browser is going to run. Let's embrace runtime. All right, we're going to start off our tour with styling. So I'd say a lot of projects got their, their first build step because developers wanted to use Sass. They wanted to use variables. They wanted to use nesting. Well, the days of needing Sass for that are over. So you've probably seen CSS custom properties or variables by now, but they begin with 2 dashes, and you can access them with the var function. And they're actually way better than Sass variables because they can be changed at runtime, and not only by CSS code, but also JavaScript. So this combo gives you a ton of ways to change the value of variables, like based on user actions and stuff, which is pretty cool. And then CSS nesting is newer, but it is considered baseline 2023, which means later in 2026, it will be considered widely available. This is like a browser feature tracking thing, the baseline thing. But it means that in 2026, CSS nesting will have browser support back for like 2.5 years. So we're almost there. And there's all kinds of stuff coming in CSS. Like, I'm serious, I need to take a course on CSS because, if you're like me, if it's been a minute since you've brushed up on your CSS skills, then you're probably missing out on tons of really cool stuff. But here's some new and newish things that are coming, like custom functions, and my personal favorite is anchor positioning. I can't wait to be able to start using that. There are all sorts of color utilities for like, mixing and matching colors and stuff. Advanced like type aware custom properties, and many more things. And by the way, do we even need JavaScript actually? Probably, maybe you do, but let's take a look at some HTML components that you previously may have used JavaScript for that you actually don't need to. A lot of this is inspired by a blog post by Lyra Rebane, and I've linked it in the slide notes. But yeah, a common need in web pages is to click an element and reveal some content. And this used to require some fancy CSS or a bit of JavaScript, but it's actually very easy now. This element's been around for a while. You may have seen it, but it's the detail summary element, so that summary becomes clickable, and then it reveals the thing, the rest of the content in the details tag. So it gives you a little component like this that you can click on to hide and reveal things. And you can take this a bit further and put these together to make an accordion style control. So this is where, like, by giving each details element the same name, then they become mutually exclusive, where opening one of them automatically closes the other ones. I had to strip out a bunch of this styling to make it readable on the slide, but this is the important bit of it. I just wanted to show that you can target a details element based on whether it's open or not, which is pretty handy. And I have a CodePen demo of this, so it's in the slide notes if you want to check that out. But this is kind of what it looks like with some clever CSS to style things and animate. And then here's another example of what you can accomplish just with HTML and CSS. Those tabs across the top are actually radio inputs. And so with CSS, we can hide the input itself and style the label to look like a tab. So based on which radio button is checked, we can make one of those 3 content areas visible. And again, I have a CodePen demo of this if you want to check that out in the notes. So these are just 2 little examples of controls. There's way more of where that came from, but just to give you a taste of what you can do with HTML and CSS only. But you might say, like, all right, Blake, I really have a real app, and I really do need JavaScript. And in fact, I need TypeScript. Well, TypeScript doesn't run in the browser, so you'll have to compile it into JavaScript first, which means you need a build step. But writing TypeScript is not the only way to use TypeScript. Most modern code editors are using the TypeScript language server to check your regular JavaScript files. And so what you can do is, if you just plop this comment at the top of a JavaScript file, you'll start getting some explicit type checking of your file. And that's cool, but you can also go the extra mile and add your own type notation with something called JSDoc. So this is a tool that it can be used to generate documentation from your code base based on this special comment syntax. In our case, we're not actually going to create any documentation, but we're using this JSDoc syntax to clue the editor in on what types we expect. So we put a comment, like we have this function add, put a comment above it. The comment starts with /*, so that it's recognized as JSDoc. And then we can use a handful of tags, like we're using @param to say this function has 2 parameters, and they are both of type number, and the function returns a number. We use the @returns tag there to do that. And inside those curly brackets, you can essentially put any valid TypeScript expression. And we can even create our own shapes if we want. So using the @typedef tag in this case, we're creating a user, and we're saying it should have a name property and an age property. And like if we tried to use a string, when we create a user, if we tried to say the age was a string, then the editor would give us the red squiggly underline, and we could hover over and see what the issue is. If you're used to TypeScript, this syntax is pretty familiar, if a bit more verbose, but VS Code in particular has really good support for type checking your regular JavaScript this way. Now, if you have a lot of files, you can just plop one of these into your project rather than having to explicitly put a comment at the top of every single JavaScript file. This is tuned for a no-build environment. I won't go line by line on this, but the main takeaway is to tell your editor that you want to check your JavaScript files, and then you just tell it where to find your files at. And if you're a TypeScript veteran, maybe you can't be bothered to write a bunch of types in JSDoc. So if you want, you can always make like a declaration file or something and put your, your actual TypeScript code in there. Because over in your JS doc, in your regular JavaScript files, you can use the import function to import those types and use them. If you do this, make sure your declaration files are included in your JS config. And then you can even still check your types with the TypeScript compiler if you want. And like this is handy for local development maybe, or if you have like a CI/CD pipeline that you want to fail when there's type errors. All right, continuing on the JavaScript train, you're probably familiar with the npm installing things and importing them into your code. Well, it turns out browsers support JavaScript modules natively. So like you could break up your project into different files and you could import them, and the browser is able to read those. When you add your script tag to the page, you need to tell it that you're including a module. So you use the type attribute on your script tag, and you say module on there. And it's worth noting, this will automatically defer the script, same as if you would use the defer attribute. All right, that's cool and all, but that doesn't help me stuff a bunch of npm packages into my no-build project, so how do I go about doing that? If you're using modules, then you're going to want to look for the ESM compatible version of the library or framework you're after. ESM is ECMAScript module. ECMAScript meaning the JavaScript, the standard that JavaScript is based off of, which isn't called JavaScript because Oracle's army of lawyers said no. But finding the ESM build of a project is easier said than done. But one easy one is Vue.js. They have a really good example in their documentation of different ways you can install it. So like in Vue, you can grab like the global version that you just plop onto the page and start using. Or in this case, we can get the ESM browser version. And so we can import that into a module and use it directly in the browser. I mean, that's a small app right there, but just to show that it's entirely doable to import Vue functions and use them in the browser. Sometimes it's hard to find ESM builds because it's an intentional choice these days to bypass the npm installation of things. So you might have to dig around, but I've had luck with these methods. You can go to npm.js directly and pop over to the code tab, and oftentimes, like if there's an ESM build in there, you may be able to grab it from there. There's also JSDeliver and esm.sh. These are CDNs that will give you ESM versions of different projects. So you can go there, and JSDeliver has a nice UI for like browsing around and trying to find the right files you need. Sometimes an ESM compatible file from a CDN turns around and imports other things from the CDN, and that might not be what you want. So in this case, you could use a tool called Download ESM from Simon Wilson. And that's a command line tool that you give it a URL to a package on a CDN, and it'll download all of the dependencies for you. There are more things I didn't have time to cover, like import maps and all kinds of things, but I wanted to real quickly say the trade-offs, because if no build means there's no minification. We're not really doing that on our code since we don't have that step. I would say that's mostly not important because gzipping, which your server probably is doing for you anyway, is more important for your package size. Modules do mean more network requests. I think this is mostly not an issue, but if you have a bunch of them that are deeply nested, it may cause the browser to not know about them quickly and have to go digging through all your import-export statements. So what you can do there is use a link tag with rel equals module preload, and you can put a list of those in your head tag to let the browser know you're going to be loading those modules. And we don't have dead code elimination, which a build step can do for you, but we do have the import function. So you may be able to, you can use that like inside of conditionals and things, so you could import some code only when you need it. All right, what about JavaScript frameworks? Like, just because you're going no build, it doesn't mean you have to give up on your fancy reactive frameworks. You actually have a decent number of choices here, and if you combine them with the module pattern, then you can get something that feels pretty nice. So we already talked about Vue.js. They have the ESM compatible build. That's totally doable. They have the CDN global version, which is totally workable. But I think for many projects, there's a better, easier option, and that's Alpine.js. I was introduced to this framework a couple of years ago by my brother, Matt, who's chilling in the back there. At first, I was unimpressed, but I started using it, and it's actually kind of amazing. So you just plop it into a script tag, or you plop the script tag into your page, and you just start using it. There's no build tool necessary. There's no configuration necessary. It uses attributes in your HTML. So like in this example, you add X data to a div, and that creates an Alpine component. You could put some state in there, like this open value set to false. So like then we have a button. You click the button, it changes the value to true, and then we have a span underneath there that's using the XShow attribute to show and hide that span based on the value of open. And Alpine is nice because it has a relatively small API. It's really just a handful of different attributes that you can use. And it works right out of the box, no configuration. And it really goes well with this whole no build philosophy. But lest you think it's just some little toy, I want to show you like a slightly more complex example. So in this example, we have a simple to-do list. First, we create a component by adding X data on the tag, and we put some state in there. And then we have this X init attribute. And inside of here, we can put anything we want to run, like when the component is first initialized. And the wild thing is that we can write full-blown JavaScript code in here, and it can be asynchronous and everything. So we can hit an endpoint, get some things, fill in the to-dos. And I mean, yeah, it's fugly, but it kind of works. It's kind of amazing. But don't worry, there's more organized ways to write this if you don't like this style. But all right, so we can loop over the to-dos with the X4 attributes. And then you have to put that on a template tag, but that's no big deal. Each list item will set its inner text to the content of the to-do. And then below that, we have a form for adding new ones. And so we're using X model to track, like if you look back up at the top, we're tracking in our state something called new task, which is a string. And so we can bind our input to that. And then when we submit the form, we have a handler there that will add the task, clear the input, and it calls prevent default so that we don't get a page reload. If you're a die-hard React fan, bless your heart, then your problem becomes finding a way to run JSX. So browsers don't know anything about JSX by default. They do know how to process tagged template literals. So fortunately, the creator of Preact made HTM. This is a utility for processing template literals in a way that makes it feel like JSX. So you can use this with React DOM, or like in this example, they have an HTM Preact standalone build that brings both of them together that you can import. And this is all workable like directly in the browser. And I won't go line by line on this or anything, but just to show you, like if you're familiar with JSX, this kind of looks and feels like JSX. It's not exactly the same, but it still lets you skip out on the build set, which is pretty nice. If you do use this, I recommend getting a VS Code extension that will syntax highlight your template literals. And you can look for those. Like if you look at lit or fast, they have extensions for that. I could give an entire talk on web components, but unfortunately I only have time for this one slide. but I've had a chance to use these at my job, and they're pretty amazing. A web component is essentially like a custom HTML element that you create with JavaScript. So this one came from an internet buddy of mine, Chris Ferdinandi, and this is a really cool one. So you wrap a form, and if JavaScript's not available or something breaks, this form will do a post to a page and refresh the page, just like a normal form would. But if JavaScript is available, it converts it into an AJAX request instead. And you can give this component some props to customize it, and like you're off to the races. And the thing about web components is that a well-made web component is going to long outlive whatever build step you were using at the time. And they're super interoperable with frameworks because they're just basically HTML elements. All right, finally, let's talk about Tailwind. Can you have Tailwind in a no-build project? Not really. There's just no good way to do Tailwind without a build step. I mean, they have a CDN version, but it's huge and it does a lot of processing on the fly. So it's really only made for messing around and not for production. But if you really want to use Tailwind, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, I suggest keeping it as simple as possible and use their CLI and making that the only build step that you have. But if you want to go completely no build step with Tailwind, there is an alternative called Lightwind, which is a static version of all the classes from Tailwind 3, but it doesn't do any processing, so you can't do like the custom bracket stuff or anything like that. But it is there if you want to use all the Tailwind classes that you know and love. The other option is not a utility class, but it's predefined CSS variables that you can use. It's called open props. I use this on HTML for People, and it's nice because it gives you a coherent set of spacing and other values. So if what you liked about Tailwind was sort of having all the design tokens and things like that, you can get that with open props. So we covered a lot of stuff in this talk, but and I mean, each one of these really deserves a deep dive. But just to recap, you don't have to follow the npm installation instructions of your favorite framework. You can choose to adopt a no-build strategy. And the options you have available is to use modern technologies available in the browser. You can use the capability of modern editors to type check your regular JavaScript files. You can take advantage of JavaScript modules without a bundler. And you can choose frameworks that don't need to be bundled or that have no-build versions. And if you absolutely want to use Tailwind, then you just have to cheat a little. All right, thanks for everyone for listening to Old Man Yells at Clouds. I know everybody's ready to eat lunch. If you have a question or want to get in touch with me about any of this stuff, you got my website, email, I'm on Mastodon, and I'll be here today and tomorrow. So thanks, everyone.
Woo, give it up for Mr. Blake.